Welcome to another episode of the CPGGUYS podcast. Our hosts, Sri Rajgopalan, Peter V.S. Bond, and Brian Gildenberg explore how brands and retailers engage consumers in an increasingly digitally driven world. And now, here are the CPGGUYS.
Hello, folks, and welcome to this episode of the CPGGUYS podcast. I'm, of course, Sri, co-founder, co-host of this podcast, and co-founder and partner of Think Blue, your key to unlocking your profitability potential. As builders, connectors, and amplifiers, we shape the future of commerce to drive your growth. Do listen to my older daughter Ria Raj's music at www.riaraj.com. That's R-H-E-A-R-A-J, and my younger daughter Laura Raj as a member of the Geffen Records Universal Music Group Cat's Eye. While my wife Kavita Raj has her own podcast, Lights, Camera, Convo, on iHeartRadio and all streaming platforms. Not able to join me today is, of course, my co-host Peter V.S. Bond, and when he's not co-hosting, he serves as Partnership Acceleration Lead at Flywheel, a division of Omnicom that helps enterprise brands improve their SEO and SEM, growing their e-commerce businesses. I want to say hello to Peter, but he's away in Japan with his daughter at Disneyland. So hopefully, Peter, when you listen to this podcast, you reminisce those great moments that you had with your family away in Tokyo. Before we get to our guests, we want to ask you to help spread the word about this community we've created in the CPGGUYS. Beyond sharing our podcast with your friends, if you're using Apple Podcasts or Spotify as your preferred listening platform, leave us a rating as it helps feed the algorithm that makes us more findable by CPG retail people like you, looking for both education and entertainment. You have shaped the show. The rating tells us how we're doing. The review actually tells us whether we're having the right conversations with the right guests. We're also happy that the CPGGUYS is part of an impressive collective of highly rated podcasts, including CPG Scoop with Risa and Jennifer, and the FMCG guys with Daniel Efrain and newly joined Christine. And now, enough of all of that. Links to our podcast, our sistercast, our landing page on Next Up, and social media profiles of my daughter Ria and Laura, my wife's podcast, may be found in the digital liner notes of this episode. So let's get our conversation going. Today is a very special episode because I have none other than my cousin who has moved successfully in a career from maybe 3 decades like me of corporate leadership into entrepreneurship in the last few years. And we're going to have a conversation with her on what happened, how did she get started, how things are going today, how hard this is to be an entrepreneur, and then working grassroots marketing all the way from scratch. So let me introduce none other than my own cousin, Sheila Narayanan, to the show. Sheila, how you doing?
Hey, Sri. It's so good to talk to you. Thanks, first of all, for having me on your amazing podcast. I often listen to it and get lots of great ideas. Hopefully, I will be as impressive as some of your other guests have been in the future. But yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate your having me on the show.
This is going to be a lot of fun. No better fun than having a family member on the show. But Sheila, before we get with the Q&A segment over here, can you give us a quick overview of what you're doing today?
Yeah, absolutely. So and I am not going to admit how many years of corporate career there have been. So after many, many years of a corporate career, spanning multiple industries and pivots, couple of years ago, I started a new business called Simply Masala. Very excited to do it. And you've been a great support of it. So I'm grateful for that. And I'm really excited to have this conversation, tell you all about what I'm up to these days.
As we continue this conversation, we will be discovering what Simply Masala is. We'll hopefully talk about some of the products you got going on, and the best day and a day that we look forward to here on the CPGGUYS is being able to buy a product on retail shelves of Walmart. Then we know you've achieved the ultimate nirvana for entrepreneurs, making a food product, which is get distribution in 4,700 stores. And we'll be cheerleaders as we watch your success day by day by day. So I'm going to move on to the Q&A segment over here, Sheila. And of course, prior to getting there, let me remind the audience that they will be able to find your LinkedIn profile as well as your company's website in the digital liner notes of this podcast for those that are listening and looking at their smartphone at the same time, curious to learn more about you and Simply Masala. So here's question number one, straightforward one, right? Would love to learn about your career, starting all the way from when you got out of college, years from Rolls Royce, your first job, then you spent time all the way through to Cognizant, Reader's Digest in between. You've done about, like you said, multi-industry. If you look back on that corporate side of the fence, as you take us through the years, what advice would you give a young Sheila coming out of college that she shouldn't repeat or should repeat?
Yeah, so my career is certainly one of many twists and turns along the way. As you mentioned, I started my career as an engineer, actually literally a rocket scientist. It always gets a laugh because I say, yeah, I know it's not rocket science, because I was designing military jet engines, initially for Rolls Royce in England, where I grew up, and then for GE when I moved to the US. But given the state of the military and defense spending, I decided to go to business school, and I went to University of Chicago, now called Booth. Post University of Chicago, I got into the data industry very early, and working with organizations that really knew how to gather, leverage data, like Dun & Bradstreet. And Reader's Digest was the OG of database marketing. People don't realize that the set of skills that we talk about really goes back to direct mail days. And so that was the good old days that they started. But then I joined Mastercard in the very early days of leveraging data predictive modeling to build the data business. And I was the head of their data offerings, head of product, head of data, and doing acquisitions in the space to get into the loyalty business, et cetera. At the same time, my daughter, who was 12, made a comment that kind of opened my eyes. At 12, she said she was too old to learn to code. Not only did that shock me, but it got me kind of curious about the gender imbalance in technology and engineering. And as I started to look through this, I realized that imbalance, it was gender, demographic, tech hadn't changed since I was a young woman engineer. So it suddenly became a passion for me to address this issue. Because as we all know, tech skills are often an economic door opener. So I pivoted this time to enable underrepresented groups in engineering and tech, initially going to the nonprofit sector, leading digital transformation at Girl Scouts of the USA, and then moving to, as you mentioned, Cognizant, a Fortune 200 company, leading their global social programs to focus on expanding programs for people who didn't have access, didn't have role models in tech. So, multiple pivots, multiple industries, and now I've pivoted again to build Simply Masala, and we are on a mission to mainstream home cooking of Indian cuisine, make it easy and accessible and successful for just about anybody. And in terms of my advice to my younger self, I would say take more risk. You and I grew up in kind of that do engineering, do medicine, do all those kind of very straightforward, straight line careers. And that's where I started. But very early in my career, I wish I had taken more risks. I wish I had built a whole lot of skills along the way, as we'll see. They're never wasted, but work for smaller organizations, get your hands dirty, learn from the ground up. That's what I would tell myself.
Awesome. Yeah, no debate there that we had to conform to certain notions here that we must be an engineer, we must get 6 degrees, we must get a master's. In reality, it's the hustle that matters and the risks you take, but calculated risks to some extent, because you want to make sure as you take those risks, you aren't dragging others down with you. It's taken me 3 ripe decades in a corporate career to make a decision that I will probably never want to work in a W-2 wage environment and build equity for myself and those that I partner with and work with today. So yeah, no debate in my head on that one, but let's go into that very spirit, Sheila, into the spirit of entrepreneurism, right? Simply Masala. How did that idea come by? What drove you to start this business? There's no better business than one that actually fits into a white space. So tell us how the idea came by and what drove you to do this.
Yeah, so it all came about as a again, you know my daughter well. It came as a solution to my daughter's problem when she went to college. And she was used to, we come from a family of foodies, and she was used to eating really good Indian food. And she didn't like the option she had of, greasy restaurant food and the packaged items in the grocery store that are so full of salt. And so she wanted to make, good, authentic food herself, not just dump sauce, on a dish and call it curry, which was really the options that you have in a grocery store. Not remotely authentic. But the problem with Indian cooking is that you need, 10 to 20 different spices to just make even one dish. And of course, in a dorm, she doesn't have room for all the large bags of Indian spices that you get in an Indian store, nor did she want to buy the overpriced exotic spices that you get, in a corner of a grocery store and use one spoon and the rest goes to waste. So she asked me to come up with a solution. So I started to, just for her, started to make these little cooking kits, and it included just the right amount of the 4 or 5 different things that you needed to make that dish with a real recipe for some of her favorite dishes. I even kept the hot spice separate so she could add as much or as little as she wanted. All she needed to do was to buy proteins, veggies, make the dish. Then her friends were like, wait, can I have some? And even her friends wanted my kits. My friends wanted my kits. And people kept telling me, start a business. So it was a gem of an idea that was percolating for quite a few years. But it turned into reality in the, late in the pandemic. We were all, you'll remember, sadly, reevaluating all our life priorities. And it came up, and I wanted to do something that was, to your point, not another corporate job. And so I decided, how could I combine my skills, my experience, and my passions? And my 2 passions, I'd already told you about my passion for the education and bringing tech to young women and underserved communities, but bring that also with my skills honed in the corporate world. But then I've always introduced different people to Indian cooking. So I said, you know what? I can kind of do this. I'm going to create a company. I'm going to be a social enterprise. What's a social enterprise? It's like Newman's Own sauces, Newman's Own, the salad dressings and so on. They donate a significant portion of their profits. And so it's the personal underlying driver for me to get that as a social enterprise. But before we get there, of course, customers have to love our brand. So our first goal is to mainstream the concept. Indian cooking is easy. It's easy when you have the right spices. We've taken away that pain point. Simply Masala makes Indian cooking easy with our pre-measured spices and an easy recipe. We're empowering people to make Indian food. We're making it accessible to anyone who wants to cook. And I'll tell you, so many people have told me how empowering it is that they've actually made Indian food. It's like they've just climbed Mount Everest. And as I see it, in addition to Taco Tuesday, you can now have Masala Monday, where you cook Indian food with Simply Masala kits because it's just that easy.
Look at that. She's got her tagline perfected. Masala Monday, just that easy. You sound like one of the great DST brands of the world, either Coca-Cola or Pepsi. Well done. It's those decades.
Getting there.
It's those decades of corporate marketing training. They got to be worth something, right? So let's demystify something for our listeners here. So Simply Masala, you want to cook Indian food. There's a way now to do it. Simple, easy. You don't have to go think about all the different spices, which usually is the conundrum for most people wanting to cook Indian food, having a bunch of bowls at home and easily accessible and not knowing. So you're solving for that. So who is your target audience? This can't be a bunch of college kids who are missing home cooking, who are Indian by birth or something like that. And what made you believe that, this can indeed be a mainstream opportunity? Were you listening to a lot of rhetoric that people were genuinely interested in making food themselves, as opposed to going to an Indian restaurant, getting the most popular dish which is not Indian, by the way, chicken tikka masala.
You're more about that later. You're right, 100%. So when I started this, I was like, oh, maybe I can sell it to a bunch of college kids. But it was really when my non-Indian friends started, who kept telling me to do this, I was like, yeah, I wonder if there's something there. And of course, I talked about the fact that I'm a data person, data person in my bones. I said, I'm going to research this. And then I realized that the opportunity lies more broadly than, second generation Indian Americans. People interested in cooking, not instant dinner. This is not for people who want to, as I said, pour the sauce on and make it in 5 minutes. They want to eat healthy because guess what? Indian food is really healthy, made right. All that stuff in restaurants, floating a layer of oil. I don't go to restaurants because I get a tummy upset every time I go. So a lot of people these days are into global cuisines. They want to get their kids to try more global, ethnic, whatever you want to call it, foods. There are people who are what you call flexitarians, who want to eat more plant-based, but maybe not give up their meat. So there's veggies, they add their veggies, but they don't want to eat that, again, the processed meat alternatives. I always say, Indian cuisine is like the original plant-based cuisine because it has so many vegetable dishes and it's healthy cooking. There's, it's real food. At the end of the day, it is real food. And guess what? There are about 15 to 20 million households that fall into that bucket. And I did, I looked through all of the data. And when I started testing my concept and my recipes, it was through a local foodies group on Facebook. I got so many volunteers who answered my survey and wanted to test my products. I was like, oh, I thought I'd get 3 people, but I got like 25 people who wanted to do this. That was my own little focus group. My aha was when I surveyed them, I never realized how mainstream Indian food was, but how hesitant people are to cook it. So that was kind of the gap that existed. And time after time, my ad hoc focus group would say, idea of so many spices go into Indian food. Where are you going to get them? Oh, I just get takeout. So once you take away that big fear, you become an enabler. And so we're busting the myth that Indian cuisine is hard to make. And we're empowering the home cook to make authentic food. And in fact, the funny thing is, you'll remember, I started the brand under Masala Mystique. But as a marketing friend pointed out to me, she's like, you're exactly the opposite. You're demystifying. Why are you calling it Mystique? So we're destroying the mystique. So that's why we're called now Simply Masala, Simply Spices. And so this is about everyday cooking. You can use them as a main course, as a side dish, integrate into your everyday meal rotation. Of course, like every cuisine, there are complex dishes, but this is about everyday cooking for people who like to cook, make healthy food, curious about global cuisines. This tends to go, skew a little upscale because often people are a bit curious about the culture too. Honestly, if I had a dime for every person who said, oh my God, this is genius, I would be extremely rich right now. So that's kind of what our sort of value proposition is and the people to whom we're targeting.
But ain't that the plan, Sheila, that everyone who says this is genius, if they had a dime, they buy the product, get them to buy the product, and then you'll solve the richness problem. So,
This is true.
now that you've been whetting everybody's appetite, you've been talking about food, you've been talking about spices. Tell us about the actual product set, right? You've got 1 item, 2 items, 4 items.
Yeah.
And then what's your process? Like if somebody wants to get a hold of the product, try it, how would they do it? Do you have a website they can buy from? Do you have a discount code for them? Like how does it work? Where can they get your product?
Well, first of all, simplymasala.com. is,
Spell it out for our audience.
Simply, Simply Masala, Masala, which just means a mix of spices. Simplymasala.com. So
And we'll make sure to put that in the digital liner notes of this podcast. And if you go back to the LinkedIn post today about this podcast, you should be able to find a clickable link that will take you to the products directly.
Thank you. So, in terms of, as I was thinking about the product set and what I was going to make, first of all, again, I got on my, and it's really funny because when you do this, as you well know, it's quite humbling when you realize all your concepts and all your preconceived notions are out of the window. Initially, I wanted to get the word curry out of the vocabulary because, as you well know, no Indian makes curry in their house. In fact, I don't know if you know this, you may know this, curry powder was invented by the British in the 19th century because they went to India, mixed a bunch of spices, brought it to the UK, and just called it curry powder.
It's what intrigues me to the day, a lot of, the original Indian food, and I'm going to start off a firestorm over here now for our listeners. Original Indian food comes from South India, mostly rice-based, coconut-based, pulses-based, very vegetarian, vegetable-oriented. A lot of the food that's available commercially in the United States as Indian food is really coming from Persia. Adaptations of Farsi food coming from Persia, Iranian food, like the naan. It's also comical when people say naan bread, but naan is really from
like chai tea.
Samosa is not from India. It's Turkish kind of origin, Ethiopian, Turkish, again, back to Iran. Chai comes from Iran. Like you start tracing, majority of the foods come from Iran, and then there's a British touch and influence. Most of North Indian food is that way, although most Indians will still claim it that it's theirs. But back to, tell us about the product set.
Yeah. So I started off actually. So like you, I said, hey, people don't know Indian food. So I'm going to share a offset of product offerings that are a variety of cuisines, because as you well know, and as you've just stated, it's as varied as having Swedish cuisine and Greek cuisine. I mean, it's that different, right? So I quickly realized that when I started to sell these, and people would, of course, come up to me and ask me, oh, are you making curry? I really like curry. And so I'd have to very nicely explain that this wasn't curry, but it enabled you to make these different things. But what I quickly realized was that the only products that were selling were the products that people knew. In fact, in my enthusiasm to spread the gospel of all those regional Indian cuisines, I, in fact, wasn't selling the products that they knew and loved. And they weren't ready to try the new stuff until I'd satisfied that itch. So really good learnings from listening to customers, humbling lesson that I need to meet them where they are, not tell them where they need to be. So I had to go back to the drawing board. I had to add chana masala, which is chickpeas, which is a huge, who knew that the whole world loved chana masala? Saag paneer, spinach with cheese. And then finally, yes, I broke down tikka masala. I have put it out there. It's an invented dish. But everyone wants it. Like literally, everyone wants it.
Is that a function of you going to college in the UK that you felt the need you had to have tikka masala?
No, I actually resisted it so much. Only in the last couple of months have I actually put it out there. And so I see it as a gateway drug. I see it as a way to get people in so they will trust me and they will eventually try the stuff that I want them to try. And believe me, there's a lot of people who really want to do this. And they come back to me and say, I have, I email with customers all the time, and they reach me on Instagram and so on. And they say it's so good. And by the way, and this is why Masala Monday works, because it tastes good so good the next day when the spices soak in. It's a great food to cook at the weekend and have it during the week. So right now we have 9 different kits, of which 6 are the ones that customers know and love and recognize. And each kit makes I'm going to say 4 to 6 servings. You can eat it as a main course with rice, naan, pita, whatever, or you can have it as a side dish. Believe it or not, and here's the funniest thing, I kind of went, you kidding me? So many people serve aloo gobi, which is cauliflower and potato, as a side to hamburgers. Their kids will eat the vegetables and leave the burger. So it's really, that's the funny, cool thing about it. And, instead of cream spinach, why not spinach and lentils? Same texture, so much more healthy. And the best part is you control the salt. There's no salt in our spices. Unlike most spice mixes on the market, no salt. Our hot spice is kept separately. You add much or as little as you want. Customers are so excited when they make the dish, and they range from millennial moms introducing these cuisines to their families. I have had urban couples who love to cook but don't have room for the 20 bottles of spices, vegans, vegetarians, empty nesters who are fed up of the same grilled chicken and steamed veggies, want more exciting meals. And recently we've uncovered all these people who are eating low salt diets but want flavor in their food that isn't salt. So those are kind of our markets. And yes, we have your usual suspects of tikka masala, asag paneer, chana masala, and then a few more that hopefully people will try.
Reminder to audience, of course, I'm speaking to my cousin today, Sheila Narayanan, about a transition from a corporate career of over 3 decades plus into being an entrepreneur of none other than make it yourself Indian food called Simply Masala. And you can find product for you to buy, for you to taste, simplymasala.com, SIMPLYMASALA. Also find it digital liner notes of the podcast. So let's talk about outreach, marketing, grassroots. How are you getting the brand name out there? How do people know you? Come on the CPG guys, will make a difference. But what about prior to that?
So marketing is, frankly, was a huge learning curve for me. It's one of the few areas that I probably haven't spent as much time in my career as I have with everything else. So initially it started off as an online-only business, but very quickly I realized just because I built it, they're not coming. So that was my first learning. And it's not just about getting the brand name out there, right? Because we're not just making another brand of soap or cereal or whatever else, because ours is a product that really doesn't exist in mass market. And the problem of cooking authentic Indian food for non-Indians has plenty of substitutes, albeit not good substitutes. Takeout is expensive. Spice mixes, sauces, everything's full of salt, all bad. But nobody kind of says, gee, I wish I had a spice kit that had 3 or 4 spices in there. So our first challenge really is education that authentic Indian cooking isn't impossible. You just need the right spices. And then that Simply Masala gives you those pre-measured spices so you don't have to figure out how to buy all those 15 spices. And you have to understand that when you ask people, have you ever tried cooking Indian food? The answer is invariably, oh no, that's too complicated. I think Indian cuisine has done a great job of marketing itself as exotic and so complex. But now Simply Masala has removed that major pain point and of buying those 15 exotic spices. And now you have the right pre-measured spices with an easy recipe. And now you're cooking. So in the beginning, I certainly did a lot of farmers markets. And let me tell you, Shri, I have such deep respect for people who are out there growing our food, real people. In our sort of sophisticated CPG world of analytics and marketing, we forget that there are people who are growing that food day in and day out. And I spent, and you well know how many weeks and weeks I was out there in the rain and heat waves and all of that, selling this stuff. And really talking to potential customers every day, talking to them about, what works, what didn't. That's why, the new products came about. And it's a small brand that doesn't have the scale and therefore doesn't have access. It's all about pounding the pavement with specialty and grocery stores. Economics of grocery stores, as we all know, is extremely challenging. And the ability to educate that customer in that 3 seconds as they look at your brand is really difficult. It's actually been quite a bit effective for us to get out with e-commerce partners, because as people peruse that, it's you can really learn about the product, and so that's been good. And then the other thing is, interestingly, given the beautiful look of our new package, we're finding a great gift market too for curious cooks who want to try something new. They've got every tool that there is. For example, our Etsy store, which is Simply Masala Spices, goes crazy in the holiday season. When we're at craft fairs, we sell out. And it's just, but these venues help us to start building that email list, share our website, our social media. And there's people all over the country who love to cook. And they want to try Indian food. I remember when I first moved to Cincinnati, which was where GE was remember that first job as a rocket scientist? In Ohio, there was a gentleman and his wife who made me, they're Ohio people. They really were excited to make Indian food. So they made me Indian food, which was very cute and very lovely. And we just had our first order here from Idaho this week. But, obviously as a data person, I'm constantly tracking all of this. But what I really want to do is double down on identifying those people, whether they're in, Vermont, Idaho, California, wherever they are, targeting them effectively and making sure that they get that message so we can engage them. So that's kind of what the next push is around.
I guess all those years of corporate training, as I mentioned, getting an order from Idaho, target marketing, things of that nature, they're in your blood and DNA at this point, which is just fun to hear. But you talked about a handful of products there. Let's talk about innovation. How do you get inspired about what to make next? What's cooking inside the Simply Masala factory? And surely you have to put up biryani.
It's definitely very high on the list, actually, along with a few others, like, whether it's, call it paneer makhani, call it butter chicken, it's all the same sort of thing. And close to your heart, I know, is Bengali dal, which I've discovered and love. So many exciting things. But interestingly, where I see our so-called innovation is really changing the perception of Indian cooking. We have, people have to realize they don't need special equipment. In fact, you can make tandoori without a tandoor oven. You don't have to go out and get a tandoor oven. You do it on your grill and you do it in your oven. It's all about making that great food at home. I mean, your mom, my mom, they lived in places that they didn't have access to all the spices and the tools. But if you kind of break that down, I see it more as a problem that we're breaking down. I see that more as our innovation. It's not just the items in our portfolio. It's more the mindset change. And I feel like once we've built that level of trust and credibility, I want to go back to that original idea of expanding the view of Indian food. So many cuisines, each with a different flavor profile. It's like comparing Italian and French food or Japanese and French food. Those cuisines are so different. It's definitely for those who are more familiar with, as they get more familiar with Indian food, they start to ask about, different kinds of food. I actually was having a conversation with this lady that I was telling about this business. And she's like, oh yeah, I like to cook rasam. And I was like, you know what rasam is? And so that was kind of interesting. So there's some people who really know the stuff, but it's my ambition to expand the American palate so that it really appreciates the breadth of Indian cuisine. But it's something that we'll need to wait until we have that trust and credibility from our customers.
So we're going to ping you back and let us know when biryani's out there.
Even she can make it. And I know you've made some of my kits, so I know you know how easy it is.
We've tried it all, so that's the good news, right? It's fun, it's easy, as you mentioned, It's like saying it's a couple clicks to get to what you want, so that easy. So that said, let's move to this journey could not have been easy. And, I know you've been at it now for a couple of years, as you mentioned. So what are big lessons through this journey you've had that you can pass on to other budding entrepreneurs so they don't have to go through the same experiences as you, especially the negative ones?
Yeah, so you're right. It's a huge mindset change. You're no longer managing the show, right? I mean, I'm used to running the show, but now I have to.
I mean, there's no chief of staff. You got to do your own expense.
Exactly.
You got to figure out your own trouble. There's no staff meetings and there's no agenda published. Really?
Yeah, no IT department. There's no brand. There's not even a decent printer, for God's sakes. So,
Wi-Fi doesn't work. You solve it yourself. How about that one?
Exactly. So, but important there, I've learned a lot of important lessons. Number one, I think even before anything, what I didn't realize that it's a lonely existence because you need to, you lose what I call that the camaraderie that you have in a corporate environment where you're all going against that same goal, whether it's, and I was at Mastercard, it was everyone going against Visa or Amex. So we were
the corporate culture, leveraging the team culture, team spirit, things of that. The only thing, Sheila, I'd say to that is the one big difference when you do that is you definitely get the camaraderie, you get friendships that are built out of it. Some last a lifetime, but you're building equity for someone else. You're building towards the dividend, which is really equity for pension funds or funds that hold. They're the ones that benefit the most. Now you that loneliness, but you're contributing to the equity of you and your family.
Agreed. So but it's, it's back to the mindset change, right? So you've got to really have that mindset change. And then I very quickly realized I needed to ask for help because I didn't know the industry. It's truly been I will say in the words of Blanche Dubois, truly the kindness of strangers who've been willing to share their knowledge. And they love the idea of our kits. That's even brought me this far. I knew nothing about CPG. I mean, the industry that I did not reel off in my list of industries, there was nothing CPG in there. So I know nothing about that. And so I'm learning, and I've been learning very fast. And I've had experts through networking tell me about, do you want to be in retail? How to think about SEO? What people acting as my focus group, as my testers, enthusiastic people helping. And then the next big learning, I'm a believer. And again, we come from a family where you can do anything. You can do anything. You can do everything. There's nothing you can. My mother had a saying, which was, cannot is a word in the Fool's Dictionary. So that was the mindset with which I came here. I was like, I can figure it all out. Well, you realize you cannot possibly be good at everything. You might be able to muddle your way through it, but you can't be good at everything. And initially, to reduce investment, of course, you end up doing everything. It's the wrong answer in the long term. And given the arc of my career, I know enough to be dangerous on very many fronts, whether it was finance or user experience or analytics. But there are skills I don't have, I won't ever learn, and like design. For MVP purposes, I created a really rudimentary design. It wasn't professional, but a big shout out to my designer friend, Ken Lally, who brought to life this idea of making an accessible cuisine that customers will look at this and say, I want to eat this. I can do this. It's beautiful packaging. I'm going to actually show you the before. Can you see this? This is what I did by myself, which was really horrible, I will admit. And this is the new design. So look at how beautiful it is. Don't you just want to grab it through the screen and eat it up? So I could never have gotten there by myself, not in 100 years, right? So I've even had, in a couple of stores that I've gone, I could see the buyer salivating as he looked at the package. So knowing your limitations is really important. Really listen to the customer. Even for a small brand, understanding their issues, learning what their pain point is, speaking their language, what will make them even consider the product. So important. So my first test recipe was aloo gobi, potato and cauliflower. My testers would ask, what kind of potato? And I was like, what do you mean, what kind of potato? A round potato. It never occurred to me that was even a decision to make. Indian cuisine is so flexible. You throw in what you have. But people were uncomfortable. Again, they were not in their comfort zone. So I had to get them there. So I had to go research potatoes to figure out what potato to recommend. And the entire industry, funnily enough, has trained people to expect a recipe on the back of a package. Ours is inside so that we can handhold the customer through their first experience. We don't leave it very superficial as it is on the back of the package. First two people that asked where the recipe was before they opened the packet. And I thought, oh, did I forget to put the recipe in? And then I realized they were expecting it outside. So we actually have to label on the back of the package that says recipe inside in bold. So again, don't assume you know what is best. Listen to the customer. When they tell you something, don't assume, well, that was dumb, which was my first reaction when, they couldn't find the recipe. But then I realized it was a problem because the industry has trained you to look on the back of the package. So those would be, I think, some key lessons. Listening to the customers, realize you can't be good at everything, and ask for help, network your way to learning the industry that you're going in.
That is awesome, Sheila. That was a real awesome set of, self-learnings that you're passing on in terms of what people should expect as you get into entrepreneurship. So let's get to the final question of the day. I'm going to go back to your corporate career. I asked you right up front, what advice would you give a young Sheila? Ahead of that, why don't you tell us, what would you advise other young women wanting to follow in your footsteps in a corporate career or being an entrepreneur?
Yeah. So, as I think about this, I think about what do I wish somebody had said to me when I was 25? Or flip side, what do I tell my daughter who is in her 20s now? And, and her eyes roll into the back of her head as I tell her all of these things from my learnings. Is number one, don't just put your head down, work. Hope that people notice your work, promote you, or mentor you, sponsor you, whatever it is that you want. You have to get yourself out there, get noticed. You have to network. You have to ask for help. It's hard work, and it's a little scary because often a lot of women, young women, are told not to put themselves out there so much. But and I know you are a great supporter of women. You have your wife, two kids. You've been an immense supporter and cheerleader and enabler for them. And I'm sure this is...
my 3 cats, Zain, Zora, and Zomi, all female.
Right, them too. You are a cheerleader for them. And I know you've been in leadership. You've supported women's leadership. We've had many a debate about this. You know how important all of these points are around that networking and getting, putting your head up and volunteering for stuff. The second thing, and this is a little controversial, I would say, and I do think this is important, especially smart women often won't own their successes. And without, and I don't mean to sound sexist, it's just that women haven't learned how to swagger. I think you need to own it. You need to talk about it. You need to learn the skill of swaggering. I'm not in an obnoxious way, obviously, but you've got to put it out there. You got to be able to talk about it. You got to own your success. And that's so important. And I think finally, it's back to the networking point, really. Keep in touch with everyone that you've ever worked with and be careful of burning bridges. It's a small world. Every place that you will run into people that knew you 10 years, 15 years ago, in this day and age of communication and connectivity, first of all, it's not hard to keep in touch. People like to hear from former colleagues. Mentors love to hear what you're up to. But make sure that you just keep networking. It's hard. As you get older, you have families, and you're like, oh, I don't have time for this. But it's important. Network, keep in touch, and swagger, own your success, and always make sure that you ask for help, you network, you don't put your head down and hope people will notice, because they won't. That is hard work, is table stakes, but it's the person who has the ability to get noticed in a good way, not in kind of, many obnoxious ways that we all have been subject to, but get noticed. And that's what I would say is important.
Awesome, Sheila. What a great conversation we just had over here, right? I wish I could go back and listen to all of this and take a deeper dive into everything, but we're at that 50-minute mark. So let me remind our audience that you can find all of our content by simply going to a web browser and typing cpgguys.com as the URL. And if you think you or your company has some thought leadership to contribute to our community discussion, simply send us an email at contact@cpgguys.com. Again, that email is contact@cpgguys.com. Maybe you can join us on the podcast like Sheila did today. Don't forget to drop us a rating at cpgguys.com on the navigation bar up top. The reason I'm asking you for this is it actually tells us how we're doing, whether we're having the right conversations and with the right guest. To our followers on LinkedIn, the show doesn't exist without you. Peter and I are in disbelief for more days that we actually have such a large following. And we're also thrilled beyond what I can really say on this podcast that episode 400 was a mark we never thought we'd hit. And then here we are. And Sheila, I can't thank you enough for making time, working with the idiosyncrasies of our scheduling here multiple times, doing, working with me on the discussion we're going to have. Thank you for doing this and being here on the CPG Guys.
Thank you. Thank you. This was an amazing experience. It's always fun when you get to work with family. So thanks a lot. And I'm sorry I missed Peter. So look forward to catching up soon.
It will always be another time. That's a wrap of this episode. See you soon on another episode of, wait for it, the CPG Guys.
The content in this podcast episode is provided for general informational purposes only. By listening to our episode, you understand that no information contained in this episode should be construed as advice from CPG Guys LLC or the individual author, hosts, or guests, nor is it intended to be a substitute for research on any subject matter. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by CPG Guys LLC. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. The views expressed by CPG Guys LLC do not represent the views of their employers or the entity they represent. CPG Guys LLC expressly disclaims any and all liability or responsibility for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, consequential, or other damages arising out of any individual's use of, reference to, or inability to use this podcast or the information we present in this podcast.